We're speaking with Judge Danetta Ambrose today, and I would like to begin by asking you about your childhood background. I know you're from New Kensington.
Actually, I'm from Arnold.
And your mother was a homemaker?
She was.
And your father worked at Alcoa in the mill?
Right.
Tell me something about your childhood experiences and what sort of values did your family instill in you?
Well, certainly, my parents were wonderful parents. I have an older sister, and education meant everything to my mother. Both my mother and my father only finished 8th grade. They were children of the Depression, and they immediately went to work. My mother was the oldest of 6 girls, and my father was the second oldest in a family of 4 children, and they both went to work at very young ages. But my mother treasured learning, and I remember everything about the summers, for instance, when a lot of my friends had household chores to do. Not in my house. My mother didn't want my sister or I doing any of the things that she did. She would march us down to the library. We'd walk clear down to New Kensington to the public library. She would walk up to the librarian and say, you know, this is Tina and she's 10, and this is Donetta and she's 5. Tell me what they should be reading. So that's how I read books all through my youth. I read the Leatherstocking Tales and all these other wonderful great American novels because my mother took us to the library.
I read that high school was a very formative time for you, and at that time you were thinking of becoming an English teacher.
I was. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be an English teacher. Of course, I wanted to be an English teacher who taught gifted students great literature, you know, and I know that isn't how it works. You have to work up to that, but I did. Actually, I had planned, I thought I would go to Indiana State Teachers College, which is now Indiana University of Pennsylvania, because, you know, that's where people went to become a teacher. Well, the principal of the high school came to see my parents, I think the summer before I was a senior, and he was doing graduate work at Duquesne University, and he told my mother and father that I should apply to Duquesne because I might get there and decide to be something other than a teacher, and that would give me other options. So that's how I ended up at Duquesne, because my mother and father thought, well, if the principal tells you that, then that's something you better do. So that was how it was, and that's what I did. And I was able to get a full scholarship there, and a job, so that was great.
You met somebody very important to you at Duquesne, and that was Carol Lose-Mossman.
That's right. Carol Lose was a senior when I was a freshman. And we were both, I don't know, just, you know how you meet somebody and you know when you meet them that you would like to be as much like them as you could be. And I admired her so much. First of all, she was so smart. She was really beautiful. And she was kind as could be. And she and I happened to share a Polish ancestry. So we would always entertain everyone at Christmas time, singing Polish Christmas carols and just doing other fun things. She was a lot of fun as well. She was going to law school, and that thought had never occurred to me. And the next thing I knew, I was admitted. I had a full scholarship and a job there as well. So that was great. Duquesne has been very good to me. And law school was, to me, the most satisfying academic experience I ever had. I just thought the things we were learning were just so interesting. I really liked law school. I mean, it was, you know, there's a lot of it that's drudgery, but for the most part, I really liked it. I loved the idea that you could work for justice, you know? That's what I really think, that was what resonated with me. It was all right to be successful and to do well as long as you were working for justice. And I thought about that a lot. It was during the time that I was in law school, Robert Kennedy had been assassinated, Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. These were all things that were happening. I was here for the turmoil that even occurred in Pittsburgh after Martin Luther King was assassinated. It was very, very hard. Right about the time I graduated from law school was Kent State. And that was very, very troubling and moving to all of us. In addition to that, after our first year in law school, I lost half my class to Vietnam, either because people were drafted because law school no longer became an exemption, or people quit to teach, perhaps, in Catholic schools, because that was still an exemption. So we were losing people and Vietnam was, the topic on everybody's mind. So it was an interesting time to be in school, I think it really was.
Now, the dean of the law school, Louis Mandarino, he accepted a position on the state Commonwealth Court.
He did.
And he took you with him as your clerk. Now, how did that come about?
Well, I will say this. Back in those days, and, it sounds a little bit like puffing, but I was at the top of the class. I was editor of the Law Review. Firms did not interview women much. I was just a few years off. But so, I didn't know what I was going to do. I really didn't. And then there was the Constitutional Convention, and the dean of the law school, his brother was Speaker of the House of Representatives at the time in the Pennsylvania legislature. And they were creating a new intermediate appellate court, something on the same level as the Superior Court, but to handle cases involving the Commonwealth. And the way that court was formed was there were going to be 4 Republicans and 3 Democrats, because at the time the governor was a Republican. And I think it was Schaefer then. Anyway, because the Democrats got to have 3 people, my dean was one of them. After 1 year, he was elected to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So the second year of my clerkship was on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court with him, which was, again, it was fabulous. The other justices on the court, to have that kind of association with them and meet them. And again, those were smaller, not like today where they all have multiple clerks. Back then they just had one, and so we were in contact with all the other judges and the other clerks and court personnel, and it became a really, really educational and prestigious kind of position to have had.
Did you learn much from Judge Mandarino?
Oh, I learned a great deal.
Applicable later?
I learned a great deal from him. He had so much common sense and so much sympathy for the underdog, even if he didn't always render a decision that might favor that person. He was so careful to make sure that every voice was heard. He was so open to those kinds of things. And I think that will last with me forever, to make sure that especially in the area of criminal law, that someone whose life is in your hands, even if it means days, months, or years of the absence of freedom, you'd better be very careful about what you're doing. And that was Lou. He tragically died at a very early age. He was only 49. But yes, the lessons, he was like a whirling dervish too. He was constantly in motion, and talk about the ultimate multitasker. And I think some of that I learned from him too.
Now from there you went to the Attorney General's office.
I did. It was 1972, and all of a sudden I think people were thinking it's time that we include women, especially, as I said, in these public offices. The Attorney General was an appointed position at that time. It was Shane Kramer. Milton Schaap was the governor. And Shane Kramer was this very dashing, handsome young politician. So I applied, and the opening, I think, was in March. But I was obligated to the clerkship until August. I was getting married in August too, so that was 1972. And they actually held it for me because they really wanted to hire a woman. I don't think it had much to do with me, quite frankly. But so then I began to realize, well, this could be an advantage, maybe this whole gender thing. But I worked there for 2 years. I did civil rights litigation, defense for the Commonwealth. I remember trying many cases in this very building. One before Judge McCune, in which I represented the Pennsylvania Air National Guard, and several before Judge Wallace Gorley. And I had a good time. It was great. I really wanted to stay in the position, but I was pregnant in 1974. My husband really wanted me to come home and work with him in his office in New Kensington. So I left. I wanted to be an ADA. So I would go over to the courthouse for one or another matter, and I would always stop to see the district attorney. His name was Al Nichols. He didn't know me and I didn't know him, but I figured I'm going to go and talk to him. And I would say, I really would like to be an ADA. And he would look at me and say, because things were very political, you know, he'd say, well, who do you know? And I'd say, well, I don't know. Who do I have to know? Tell me who I have to know, and I'll go meet them, and then I'll know them. And I think I just wore him down, because every single time I went over there, I went in. I just did. I would be doing something in family court usually, but I would walk over to Judge Skulko's courtroom, and I would watch the proceedings. And a neighbor of mine and a good friend, Lou Sarasso, he was an ADA, and he would be trying cases. And I would watch him walking around the well, and I would think, wow, this is the greatest thing anybody could do. You know, I really wanted to do it. And then I got a job in I think it was 76 or 77. I was an assistant district attorney, the first woman ever to be an assistant district attorney. I loved being an ADA. I really did. It was probably the most fun I ever had as a lawyer, I will say.
You handled a very well-known murder case.
I did. Kill for thrill.
That was the Lesko
and Travaglia.
Yes. Tell me about that.
Well, it was quite an experience. For a part-time job, if I had been working with anyone but my husband, I probably would have been fired, because I devoted practically full-time attention. We went through several jury selections out of county, because we were bringing the jurors back here. It was the kind of thing that was gathering media attention, not only on a local level, but on a regional level. So, you know, you end up being in the paper every night, on TV, and it was quite an experience.
Basically,
a lot of work.
In 1981, you decided to run for common pleas judge.
I did. It was kind of an unbelievable. Well, Judge Mahalik really encouraged me. He was the trial judge. He said to me, you know, there are these openings. There were 2 openings at the time. And he said, you should run. And I thought, well, I can't run. I'm 35 years old. I'm a woman. No woman has run. Well, my husband was definitely in on this from the beginning. He really wanted me to run. And as circumstances developed, Judge Earl Keim died unexpectedly. And then there were 3 openings. And I remember Ray was out. Ray was quite a golfer. And he was out playing golf. And when I heard that Judge Keim died, I don't know, I was sort of unsettled by it. It was very sudden. And I remember getting in the car and going out. He was playing golf that morning, and I knew I could catch him before he teed off. But he was down the hill, and I remember yelling at him. I said, Ray, Judge Keim died. What should we do? And I guess I was asking him, should we send flowers? Should we wait? And he looked up at me, and he said, buy billboards. I'll never forget that. Buy billboards. People told me when I decided to run, they said, you know, beware of women, because they'll kill you. They're going to be the ones that kill you. The exact opposite was true. I really believe women elected me. I really believe that. It was a great campaign, and you know, I led the Democratic ticket, won the primary, and 32 years ago today I was elected. So it was my 36th birthday the day I was elected. So that was really quite, you know, I think it was a little bit nervy, but I loved that job from the day it started. So I was not at all ever sorry that I had done that. I just loved being a judge, and I still do.
I read that the most important case or cases that you handled were involving asbestos suits.
Well, after, and I can't remember when it was, I was a judge there for 12 years, but at some point we had this huge backlog of asbestos litigation. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of cases had been filed. And nobody was really doing anything with them, not the plaintiff's bar, not the defense bar, and Judge Mahalik was a little concerned about it, and he asked me if I would try to do something with them. There were probably 300 or 400 cases, I can't even remember. So we just had a whole system. We got rid of all those cases, and next thing I knew, we were getting a Democratic president. So there had been a span of 12 years with Republicans. There had been Reagan and then the first President Bush. And for the most part, you know, all the appointments were Republicans, because that's how it worked back then. And I actually had been interested in a seat on this court because, you know, I love the Constitution. And I think that it would have been an honor to be a judge for the United States of America. So I had been actually considered for seats during the Bush and even Reagan. I'd always been on that short list. I was what they used to call the token Democrat. But now we had a Democratic president after Bill Clinton was elected, and I submitted an application and was vetted by the Judicial Nominating Committee and everyone else. And then it's just about 20 years ago, right now, that Judge Lancaster and I were confirmed by the Senate, nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate.
Did you have hearings?
Oh, yes, we had. Oh, I tell you, it was so funny. My Senate Judiciary Committee hearing was a stitch, because you have to understand how people in Arnold are. It's like everybody knows everybody, and even though I was living in Lower Borough at the time where I live now, but still, they rented a bus. People in Arnold, and everybody came to my Judiciary Committee hearing.
What were your expectations about for being a federal judge, and did they play out the way that you expected them to be?
Well, I thought this. I have to say this. I did love being a judge in Westmoreland County. I did. I loved every bit of it, and I could have been happy if I were still there today. But I expected that I would have more diverse cases and really good lawyers and interesting things. And it did play out. So I have loved every minute of this job as well. And I've gotten to do some really interesting extrajudicial things. I've been on a judicial conference committee. I was on the Committee for Criminal Law for 7 years, and through that association became very close to the people on the United States Sentencing Commission. So I've been on their faculty for many years. I've been on the FJC faculty for new judges for a number of years. And in fact, in a couple months, I'll go finish another mentoring for new judges who've been on the job for about 6 months. And now that I'm a senior judge, I have a full caseload in St. Croix and St. Thomas. And that's a whole different culture there that I've been exposed to, which has been very interesting. And great cases, great people.
Do you see yourself in younger women that are getting into law, or do they have a very different outlook than you had when you started?
Well, I think they probably have a lot more confidence. I do. I think women have a lot more confidence. They're a little more sure of themselves, and they should be. And I'm happy for that. I'm happy. I think I'm working in an office here with 5 women who are all smarter than I am. And I say that, I used to say that to Judge Ziegler all the time, and he used to say, but they're not wiser. So I don't know if that's true or not. But I look at these young women who are so bright and so hardworking and so great, and I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of seeing how women have developed in the profession.
When you were elevated to the Chief Justice position, did that change the relations between you and your colleagues very much? Did it feel very different?
Well, I think what it felt like was I became closer to everyone, I think. I loved being Chief Judge. It was a wonderful opportunity to implement some things that I've been thinking about for a long time. And I was really, I am not a person who thinks she has to be in charge of everything. I have never been. So people had very, very important jobs. They performed them well. They felt very engaged. And I think it was a time when the whole court felt very engaged with each other.
You've been a senior judge for a few years now.
It's now 3 years.
What keeps the job interesting and challenging for you, if it does?
Yeah, first of all, all these cases in the Virgin Islands have been a whole new thing. They're very interesting and challenging. I'm still doing my FJC teaching, we call it Baby Judge School. I'm still working with the Sentencing Commission on in the aspect of speaking on panels and teaching. And I still like doing the cases here. I'm going to be trying, I was supposed to be trying a criminal case next week, but that got postponed. But I'll try one at the beginning of December. And I have it's still, as I said before, I'm not tired of it. Every case is different. I like everything. I have loved every minute of being a lawyer. I have, from the very beginning. There is nothing that has bored me or nothing that has disappointed me. I have really liked it, and I still like this. It's a wonderful job, and I feel very, very, very fortunate to have been able to have this job,
What do you like doing with your free time, such as it is?
Well, I have a grandson, And he is in New York, and my son and daughter-in-law, so I'm up there at least once a month. So I love spending time with him. He and I are great buddies. He's going to be 3 in January. So that's my main thing. I love reading. I still read a lot. I love movies. I love movies. And I'm a great television person. People say I never watch any television. I love television. I watch television. So I think there are better things actually on television than there are in the movies. And so, and I exercise. I do that every day. I get up and go to the gym early in the morning, and I walk with friends. And I have wonderful friends at home, so I do a variety of things with them.
What would you like your legal legacy to be?
Oh, what would I like it to be? Well, I hope that people would look at me and say, well, she did a great job. She did a great job. She was fair and she was even-handed. And I think that's it.
Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover?
I don't think so. I think that's, I don't know, but talk about legacy. My son's a lawyer, so I would like to say that. And I'm always very proud of that because I think that he did not start out to be a lawyer, and I think that maybe that's a tribute to his mom and dad. I remember once when he was in school, he had to write a paper. I remember when he was a freshman, every Friday they had to write a paper. But he wrote a paper about how he grew up in a family that spoke 2 languages all the time. They spoke English and legalese, and he would listen to the dinner conversations, and so that was something I think that maybe we did have an influence on him. My daughter-in-law is also a lawyer. And my grandson, who is not even 3 yet, will tell me when I come up to see him, because he has 2 parents that are lawyers. He will say, Grandma, we can go to Prospect Park to the sandbox, or we can go to the Fifth Avenue playground. Those are your options. That's what he says. So I say, okay, Ted, I'll choose one of those options.